Welcome to the Ironwood Gym. Today I want to talk about being a strength coach at the college level. More specifically, I want to address what it takes to get to be a strength coach at the college level. There's a huge misconception that being a strength coach at the college level is very glamorous, is very exciting, and is everyone's what they were just meant to do. Well, if those are the things you're thinking, please find something else to do and don't even bother being a strength coach. To be a strength coach at the college level, you have to be very passionate about what you do. It is not about glamour. It is not necessarily exciting. And it's definitely not what you were meant to do, because it's what you've chosen to do. This is for the ones that really are passionate about being a college strength coach, passionate about helping the athletes become better versions of themselves as athletes and growing as people as well. This is a very tough position to get to. And the process of getting there is what most people don't want to talk about, and what causes most people to quit, even potentially good coaches, to quit before they even get started. So to do this, I'm going to start by telling you what my story was. So I started out as a student assistant at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse as part of my academic program. And during that time, which was from 2001 to 2002, I was actually paid an hourly wage, and I worked roughly 10 to 15 hours a week. In some ways it was good experience. In other ways it was just something to build my resume. The pay was minimal. That meant I had to take a job outside of that to help pay for everything else I needed. Pay for my rent, pay for my groceries, pay for my electric bill, my phone, whatever the case may be. So to do that, I worked at Walmart approximately another 30 hours a week. So that was roughly 40 to 45 hours a week that I was working. I still had to balance school, and I was trying to get my powerlifting career started, which I was also very passionate about. So I did not cut out any time. I made sure I got in all my training for that as well. But as you can see, pretty much going to be busy all the time with that type of schedule. Full academic course load, working 40 plus hours a week, training as a powerlifter. That enabled me to get to the point where I would do an internship at Arizona State University. I did that in the spring of '03. Joe Ken was the head strength conditioning coach there. Mark Uyama, who has spent a considerable amount of time in the NFL, was there as a GA. And I was directly working under Rich Winter. In that internship, I worked 60 hours a week, basically 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day, Monday through Friday. On the weekends, I worked at Walmart. I was able to transfer from my store in Wisconsin down to a store in Scottsdale, Arizona, which wasn't that far north of Tempe. And I would put in 24 hours a week there, along with the 60 I did with my internship. Now, what did that mean for me? That meant 2 days a week, Mondays and Fridays, after I finished my internship at roughly 5:30, 6 p.m. in the evening, I would drive up to Scottsdale and work from 7 to 11 p.m. Okay? Then on Saturday and Sunday, I would work 8-hour shifts there at Walmart, giving me 24 hours total for the week. That's not a lot of money when you're only making, I think I was making roughly $1, maybe $1.50 more than minimum wage at that time. During that time, to say the least, financially things were difficult. What did I have to do? I was fortunate enough to find a roommate. That enabled me to cut my rent costs, because the rent there in that Phoenix, Tempe area was a lot more than it was in Wisconsin. That was a pretty rough time trying to do that, but it was what I was getting out of it was so much more important than what I was putting into it. Putting into it was a ton of effort, some of it which did not even involve strength conditioning. It was trying to work long hours and get up in the morning to go back and do my internship throughout the week. But what I was getting out of it, the experience that I got out of it, working with Rich, working with Mark, working with House, Joe Ken, I learned so much from that I was able to take with me to utilize later in my career. So in the end, that internship was paying for itself. I did not receive a dime from the internship. The only thing I received from the internship compensation-wise was a parking pass to park in the student parking lot that was closest to where the weight rooms were. The other thing I got out of it was Joe Ken found out that I was going to be going back to La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was near Winona, Minnesota. And he happened to know the strength coach at Winona State University. So one day while I'm out on the floor working with, I believe it was the swim team, he sends another intern out to get me. He says, hey, House wants to see you in the office right now. So, of course, I go to the office not knowing what's going on, and he's on the phone with Jeff Renardi of Winona State. Ends up, I get a volunteer position at Winona State University. I'm coming from an internship that is completely unpaid, and I'm going to another school to be a volunteer in the strength conditioning department. Again, it was all what was necessary to get to what I wanted. I did that from 2003, summer of 2003, all the way through spring of 05. So another 2+ years. During that time, of course, I'm working at Walmart. Still working at Walmart, working 40+ hours a week there, and still now competing as a powerlifter. So my days are stretched from roughly 4:35 in the morning, whenever I was leaving to go to Winona, to 8-9 p.m. at night, or sometimes even later than that. Sometimes it was closer to midnight when I was getting home from Walmart. My powerlifting training fit in between Winona State and Walmart. My rent was very cheap there in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I was able to get by, but it was barely. You know, there was times I was calling home saying, hey, from my parents who did not have a lot of money, my car's broke down. Again, I can't pay for it. I need my car to go to work. I still remember my dad telling me, you need to quit this volunteering at Winona State. You're not making it there. You need to quit that and go get a second job that actually pays money. That was unacceptable in my eyes. It was completely unacceptable because I knew that in strength conditioning, you have to be active. Once you're not active, it's going to be very difficult to get your foot back in the door. So I couldn't quit. And I didn't have time working those type of hours to fit in another job on top of that. There was no DoorDash back then. There was no Uber where I could just pick up things whenever I wanted. So at the end of that position there at Winona State, I applied to be a graduate assistant at VCU, or Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, where Tim Contos is the head strength conditioning coach. He hires me on. I'm going to be a GA there. However, I'm not getting paid anything. Okay, it is paying for my school, so I won't have to pay anything to receive my master's. I'll go through the academic program and not have to pay for that, which was nice, but I'm not getting paid anything on top of it. So my goal was, or my thought process was, I will keep working at Walmart. I transferred from Wisconsin down to a store north of Richmond, Virginia, and I'll keep working there and do all my GA responsibilities at the same time. However, I had to manage my academic course load as well. And trying to do all three of those, academics, coaching, and Walmart, was not going to work. I was working roughly 50 to 60 hours a week in the weight room as a GA. I had a ton of obligations as far as my academics went with the master's program in sport leadership, and I was trying to work 20 to 30 hours a week at Walmart. It wasn't working. Fortunately, during that time while I was a volunteer at Winona State, I had gotten married to my still current wife, Erin, and she had found a teaching position down south of Richmond, Virginia, which enabled us to make ends meet. It wasn't great, it was still tough, but we were able to live off that income. We get to the end of that year, and I was unable to find a full-time coaching position. Not knowing what I'm going to do, Tim actually offered me the chance to stay on there at VCU part-time. Now, if you understand what part-time means in strength conditioning, it means you're working full-time but getting paid less than full-time. Okay, so I was still working 50, 60, usually around 60 hours a week there in the weight room at VCU. But I was getting paid basically what my GA position was worth. So instead of the school being paid for, I was able to receive that money that would have went towards a degree program. That worked out well. It worked out very well for us. Still not a lot of money. I mean, you're looking at a teacher's salary back in 2006 or 2005 and about $15,000 a year to replace my master's degree. So not a lot between the two of us, but that was a lot better. We don't live tremendously luxuriously, so we were able to make ends meet. At the end of that year, I'm still looking for a full-time position, having a hard time, but was able to land a position at the University of Texas at El Paso, or UTEP. Moving there in 2007, it was a difficult move. Okay, I think I was making around $26,000 or $27,000 a year as a full-time strength coach, and I was absolutely elated. I was so excited about that because it was my first full-time position. I didn't really care what the salary was. I wanted to be coaching in a full-time position, and I knew that would set me up for the future. But moving to El Paso, if you know about El Paso much, my wife coming there was very difficult for her to find a job. So our family income total was only what I was making as a strength coach. Okay, we didn't have any extra income. She didn't find a job for at least the first 6 months we were there, and then she found a minimum wage job. Actually, I think it was 25 cents higher than minimum wage because she had a degree. They gave her an extra quarter. And that's all we had for the first 3 years we were there. Maybe 4 years we were there until she found a better job. So it was always hard making ends meet. Groceries were going on a credit card and not being paid back, only paying the minimum for 3 years. It was extremely difficult to make things make things work financially. But the longer I spent at UTEP, the small increases in wage that I would get from time to time, it wasn't even every year, because if you remember that time period, 2008 and 2009, big recession, the college wasn't giving out raises every year. Okay, so ended up making it to 2016, and from there I found a head strength coach position at Missouri University of Science and Technology, or Missouri S&T, and at that point, this is 2016, I get my highest paying job ever at $41,000 a year, and worked there for 2 years now before ultimately deciding I needed to step away from strength conditioning. But that's the process that I went through. This video isn't to glorify what I've done and say, hey, look how special I am for how hard it was. This is to let coaches know, especially aspiring coaches, that this profession is hard to get into. You have to make sacrifices. I remember one of the coaches that we hired while I was at UTEP telling me what he went through. And it was harder than what I went through, not knowing if I could pay rent or not at the end of the month. He actually was living in his car at one point. So those of us that have made it, some have gotten by easier, some of it's even more difficult than that, but it takes sacrifice. And to sit there and say that people should just abandon the profession, or that it's un-American to do an internship, it's not un-American. It's about having the opportunity, and you're getting the opportunities to learn. That's what I went to all these positions to do, was to learn. And in the end, I got to where I wanted to be. But it takes sacrifice. It's not an easy thing to do. If you're not willing to do that, then go work in the private sector or go find a profession that pays a lot of money because that's what you ultimately want. It is hard. I'm not going to lie about it. Looking to the future, what schools should be, should schools pay their interns? If you're doing it as obligations for a degree, I don't know that they necessarily should. I do think that they should provide housing and a meal plan for all interns. Okay, so if you're working there, you're putting your time and effort into their school, even if you're coming as part of the obligations for your academic program, you're moving halfway across the nation, you're moving all the way across the nation, whatever the case may be, the least they could do is provide you with a dorm room and a meal plan. Okay, that would make things so much better for the intern. Paying interns beyond that academic program, it would be really great if they could find $15,000 a year, $20,000 a year, which isn't a lot of money, but it puts something down for those coaches that are helping make their athletic program better. They're there to learn, but they're doing the work that other people aren't there to do. So instead of just relying on free work, yes, they should be paying them something, especially if they're not doing this for a degree. But that's what I have. That was my path. I'm sure there's other coaches that have had harder paths, but it's really about personal sacrifice for what you're passionate about and what you want to accomplish. What are you willing to sacrifice to get there? So that is it. I would love to hear your experiences. Leave them down in the comments. I would like to hear them. But until next time, always be in the pursuit of strength.